Okay, AP Computer Science A Unit 6. We filled out this note sheet already in previous sessions, so now we're going to go ahead and type it up and make a working version of it. So I'm going to open up BlueJ, and there might be something open from before, and you can close that project. I'm going to do a new project. I might go in here and try and remember how I name these P6AA projects. I'm going to call this double A because there's a P6A that's separate from this. Now I'm going to put it in a different folder. I want to create a new folder, Unit 6. Okay, and it's in that folder. I want to put this in there. So I guess a P6AA project. Project. Okay, so we'll do that. I should create it. This one is less about class composition, all that stuff. It's really just kind of separate little classes. So we're going to create a class. I'm going to call it Array 2DDemo. Notation. Okay, I'm going to open it up. I'm going to get rid of everything that's here, and we're going to start typing. So we're going to do public class array 2D demo, and then we'll make a main method, public static void main string args. In method main and end class array 2D demo. All right, so I'm going to actually kind of put some notes in here at the same time. So /1 create 2D array. So this is how you create a 2D array. It can hold primitives or objects, whatever. So mine's going to hold ints. And put double empty brackets, and I'm going to call it game board. You got to give it a name. Variable, new int. Now here you got to give it the size. So I'm going to do 4 × 8. Things a little different than what I did before. So that's how you create a 2D array. How do you populate it? Populate. How do you fill it with values? So populate 2D array. I'm going to say game board, and you can put things in like this: 1, 2 equals 56. Game board 2, or 2, row 2. Now it's always row first, column second. If you try to put null in like we were talking about, it's not going to let you do that. So I'm going to let you compile. Or it did? Nope, incompatible types. Because null is for objects and ints are primitives. So if it's any other kind of object, you could put null, but otherwise you get to like 0. All right. And then 3, how do we access individual 2D array elements? Okay, so how do we access them? Well, system.out. We're going to make some changes as we go. We'll just start simple system.out, but println. We could put game board 1, 2 there. System.out.print ln game board 0. So we just try that. Let's see if we can compile it. Run it. There you go, 56 and 0. Okay, so, but, might want to print out the whole thing or access or fill the whole thing. So I'm going to go ahead and comment these out. And we're going to look at filling it up. So we got to use nested for loops. So there's something called call major form int row. So that means we're going to go, or this is row major form. We're going to start with rows, and that's kind of the more traditional of the approaches. Make a big difference in printing it out and trying to make it look maybe the way you want it to look. So we do length for the number of rows. So there's two different dimensions. There's rows and columns. If you just do length on the 2D array, it gives you a number of rows because that's kind of like the first structure. And then inside, we're going to do another for loop. Int, I'm going to call the counters there columns. And anytime you're doing 2D arrays, this is just a good way to do it right now. Now, the number of columns, any row is going to have the same number of columns. So you could do any row, but row 0 is the best one to go with. And you do the length of row 0. And that'll give you the number of columns. Okay, so in here we could, we could fill it some other way. Game board, maybe there's a certain formula. So row, column, you always got to go row first, column second. And you could say equals row plus 1 times column plus 1. Something like that. End inner 4. End outer 4. That kind of helps show you which one. So this would fill it row major form, just as an example of going through and filling it. Now, another thing that we might want to do is be able to print all 2D array elements, not just individual ones like we did before. And so we're going to go ahead and start with row major order, which is similar to what we just did up there. So for int row equals 0, row is less than game board length. Row plus plus, increment it. So open that one up. Then have another for loop. For int. Now we're going to do columns. So column second, row first is row major. I'll show you in a second that we could do columns. Now the size of the columns, pick any row. Row 0 is your safest one, and find the length of it like a 1D array. And if we're going to print it out, you could say, okay, well, let's do system. We'll just system.out.println game board row column. End inner 4 and 4. Okay, let's just see what happens if we do this. Okay, I think I tried to predict it for you before, but let's see what happens. We're hoping for kind of a block kind of printout. And instead, it prints them all in one big column. Okay, there's a couple reasons for this. So let's go back in here. One is that we shouldn't do new line every time. Otherwise, they're all going to get new lines. They're all going to be one big column. And then the other thing is, so if we do this, this will print them, you know, and then if you did, okay, so let's just compile this and see what happens if we do this. Well, now they're all on the same row and all really close together. So we might want to space them out. Okay, so one thing we can do to space them out is to add a tab between each one. But then we want the second row to be on its own row. So after what happens is you go to row and you print all the columns in a single row right here. So after that's done, you do a system.out.println with nothing, just to bump it down a line. So if we do those two things, I think it should, need a semicolon. If we do those two things, it should print out in a more friendly way. So let's try it out. There we go. Kind of a block. This is row, right? They're kind of spaced out and stuff. Okay. So you're going to be using it on a lot of your assignments, this idea. And try not to don't just copy and paste this code into your next one. And there'll be some telltale signs that you did that. Okay. So let's do column major form now. Now, just to space it out, I'm going to keep what we already have. So I'm going to just add a couple blank lines. This time I'm going to do column major form. So I'm going to do, so let's add some notes here. So we'll do column major, row major. All right, so we're going to do a for loop. So we're doing for loops again, but we're going to start with columns. So column equals 0. And then column is less than game board. Now we still got to get one of the lengths of the rows to get the number of columns. So be careful. People are going to forget to do this and just automatically always just do dot length in the first one. So column plus plus. And we'll do a nested for loop, and we'll do rows. Now, the number of rows is always just going to be the length of, because a 2D array is really a 1D array of 1D arrays. So the first 1D array is going to give you the number of rows. The inner 4 is still the inner 4. Outer 4 is still the outer 4. So in here, if we do say, let's just say we're going to print them out, system.out.println. We don't want the ln, we already talked about that. And then it's going to be game board row. Now, even though we started with columns first in the outer for loop, you still have to do row first when you access anything. Okay, you still have to do row column. All right, and then we would want to print a new blank line. After each row, and let's try that out. Okay, let's compile that. So the values, the 2D array is the same in both of these situations. We're going to print it two different ways. The same 2D array, they have the same values. So this is row major form, and then this is column major form. What happens with column major form is it ends up being kind of sideways. So the rows start as 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, now the column starts with 1, 2, 3, 4. So what went across before is now going down. So it gives you a sideways version of the 2D array. So, but as far as just going through to analyze a 2D array, like if you really have no plans to print it out, present it visually, row major or column major, could do the same things. So that is that. I guess we could take a quick look at the assignment. And P6A says create a 3x4, 3 rows, 4 columns, 2D array of integers. Fill it with random numbers between 0 and 1. So you can use math.random, which is actually potentially a good reminder. Could be on your Unit 5 test next week. Use a nested for loop. That's what we're just doing to print the array in a rectangular format. So that's what I was just saying, print it in kind of friendly format. Finally, print the row column pair of coordinates of all instances of the number 5. Use nested for loops to populate the 2D array and print out its contents. So I want one set of nested for loops to populate it, one set of nested for loops to print it. Strategic use of if statements and tabs will allow you to print the array in rectangular format. And then I want a third set of nested for loops to search for the 5s and print them out as they find them, print out their locations. Okay, so it's kind of a searching algorithm through a 2D array. So there should be 3 sets of nested for loops. P6B says create a 3x5, 3 rows, 5 columns, 2D array of integers. Fill it with numbers 1 through 15 in row major order. So I actually don't want random numbers on this one. I want 1 through 15. So the first bar has a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all the way up to 15, which is perfect for 3x5. We'll have 15 spots. Row major order, left to right, top to bottom, using a for loop. Print the 2D array in rectangular format using a nested for each loop. So that's going to be a little bit of a challenge. Like, how do we do a for each loop? Nested for each loop. Now, remember how for each loops work. They can go through an array list. And remember that a 2D array is a 1D array of 1D arrays. So here, I'll go and give you guys a little bit of, I'll give you guys a little bit of I think I'll do it in a separate video. No, let's just do it right now. So how do you do for each loops with 2D arrays? So let's see. Okay, for each loops. So for each loop, let's see if we can do it. You can't just do a for each loop for a 2D array. So you'd have to say for, and then there's a certain kind of object. Now remember, a 2D array is made up of 1D arrays. So the type of objects in the 1D array is also another 1D array. And you might call that like row. Because what a for each loop does is I'm going to do this for the game board. is it goes through the game board array like it's a 1D array and pulls out each element, which is another 1D array. Then you could do another for loop in here, and now we're going to go through one of the rows. What are the elements at each spot of the row? Well, it's just an int. You call that column. And here we put row because we're using the name. We named it row, and this is the name of the 1D array you're supposed to put right here. And let's see if we can do this. System.out. This would pull each row out and then go through each column, and then we could system print out column plus. I'm going to try and essentially copy our first version of our printed out and see if I can pull it off with the nested for each loops. End, inner, for each. End, outer, for each. So let's see if we can try that. Might be something good to add to your note sheet or something. So let's see if this compiles. Okay, it compiled. Let's run it. Let's see if we can void main. Okay, something happened. Something. Okay, that was the first. I think that's the first one. And there was this. Oh, I forgot to do the new lines. Yeah, that's what I forgot to do. The new line. I got to do that in there too. Okay, so let's see. I know what I did. So after each row, remember we want to print out a new line, kick it down to the next line. Okay, I think that'll do it. File it. Let's run it. All right. So I didn't put some extra lines in between this, but this right here, this looks exactly like this. So I did it, I pulled it off. All right. So that's the way we do it for each loops with 2D arrays. You got to go through the first one. 2D array is really a 1D array of 1D arrays. So you're going to go through the first array that holds a bunch of one-dimensional arrays. So that's what you have to describe the type of objects you're pulling out, and you're copying them into this variable called row temporarily. And then for each row, which now has a 1D array, we're going to go through them and pull out each element and copy it into this thing called column. And then we're going to go and print that out. Those are just individual ints. After this is done, it comes back up here and copies the next row. So that's how you do it. So going back to the assignment real quick, let's see if there's anything else we want to mention. So you're going to be doing that, print it with 2D array. And then after that, you're going to then complete the following calculations. Calculate and print the total of all 15 elements. Calculate and print the total of each row. Calculate and print the total of each column. So you're going to maybe want to use separate nested for loops or for each loops. I guess it's up to you to do each of those three things. So you're going to have a bunch of nested for each loops. P6c Multiplication Table. Write a program that will create and print a multiplication table using 2D array. The program should be able to accept any number of rows and columns and correctly generate the multiplication table. Row and column numbers should be displayed along the top and left side. You could use JApp-Champaign to ask the user's input for the number of rows and columns. So here's the deal. Here's the thing that people miss. The top and bottom of multiplication table just has the numbers. 0, see, 1 times 1 is 1, 1 times 2 is 2. So the top edge and the left edge tell you the numbers, the factors, and everything else in between are the products. So I need that extra top edge and left edge in your multiplication table, and it should be part of the 2D array, not printed separately. I want that first row and that first column of 2D array to be the factors. And if someone says they want a 9 by 9, 9 rows, 9 columns, it should give you 9 by 9. Okay. P6D, this one's a little fun. You're going to write a program to fill a 2D array with the letters of the alphabet A through Z. The way you get A through Z is kind of up to you. You could use a string and use substring, just the alphabet A, B, C, D, all the way to Z. You could do, you can create a one-dimensional array of single letter strings with all the letters. Okay, print your array using nested for loops. Okay, so you're just going to print it. Then you're going to do some interesting things. You're going to fill the array at the bottom right corner, working your way to the top left corner. So you're going, it's kind of backwards from the way we usually think. You usually think first row, left to right, but we're going to go backwards, bottom right, and going left and up. And then you're going to do part C, fill the array, starting at the top left corner, like normal, working left to right, but then right to left on the second row. So this is like a snake pattern. You're going back and forth and back and forth. Okay. And D, fill the array by filling your first column, then your second one. So there's a column major order. And then if you want, you can try some other options like capital letters or digits and things like that. So that's that. And then there's a jukebox project and a password created. All right, that's it. Start working on these. This is a quick unit because it's kind of like part of a unit. It's arrays, but now 2D arrays.